Coming up, is the 2025 NBA draft the most important in Nets franchise history? I'll answer that after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And on today's show, I'm going to break down why I feel the 2025 NBA draft is the most important in Nets franchise history and how it could set the stage to grow the fan base for years to come. And if we're going to talk about the historical significance of this draft and what it could mean for the Nets moving forward, I think we need to set the stage for the NBA historically and also for the Nets historically. So take a second. Think about the most successful and most popular franchises in the NBA, whether it be the Celtics, Lakers, Warriors, Bulls, Spurs, whoever else you want to name. Think of the first players who come to mind when you hear those teams' names. There's a very good chance that those players were drafted by those teams near the top of the draft and were homegrown, were developed, and were allowed to grow with that organization for an extended period of time. Now think of the Nets. Who is that guy? A team that obviously has not had much success in terms of winning championships or deep playoff runs or anything like that in its modern NBA history, but also just from the standpoint of a connection of the fan base and a player or multiple players who were able to grow with the team, the fan base was able to kind of come up with the team, grow a real attachment to, and able to, kind of get excited about in that way. There really aren't any guys. And, when you talk about the significance of the Nets having the 8th pick, maybe even getting another lottery pick in this draft with how good it is, how deep it is, that is extremely significant for a franchise that has not been able to land those homegrown type players. And if we're going to talk about the Nets draft success or lack thereof, I think you have to go through the history of this team's draft exploits and how hungry I would say this fan base probably is to have one of these homegrown top tier talents. Because I spent the last couple days, I went through this, I researched this extensively, the number of times that the Nets have picked in the lottery, let alone the top 10, just the number of times that the Nets have drafted in the lottery. And when they have done it, they've had extremely little success when it comes to high-end outcomes, and there haven't been that many opportunities for a team that you're talking about, who came into the NBA in 1976. So we're talking, nearly 5 decades long of drafting. The Nets have had 24 lottery picks, or if we're going back pre-lottery, just say top 14. The Nets have picked in the top 14 24 times in the franchise's history, and there isn't a single superstar level player among the group. Not one. There's some good players. There's some guys who have managed to make all-star teams, but there's not a single superstar level player. And even the all-star selections are very few and far between. I said 24 players. Those players have combined for 7 total all-star appearances with the Nets. That's pretty incredible when you think about it. All the times the Nets have drafted in the lottery, 7 total all-star appearances. One player has made multiple all-star appearances with the team, and that is Buck Williams, who had his number retired and was drafted in 1981. The other players, Derek Coleman, Kenny Anderson, Kenyon Martin, and the most recent being Brook Lopez in 2013, who was an injury replacement. Those are the only guys who have made an all-star team with the Nets as a guy who was drafted in the lottery. Pretty unbelievable when you lay it out like that. And, when you talk about beyond that, beyond even, obviously, the success will go hand in hand with the longevity. But when you're talking about homegrown players that the Nets has been able to attach, the fan base has been able to attach itself to, these guys haven't been there long because there hasn't been that success. When you look at these 24 guys who were drafted in the lottery or in the top 14, only 10 out of the 24 played over 4 seasons with the team. And the last 2 being Terrence Williams and Derek Favors in 2009 and 2010. Those guys were traded within their first 2 seasons of the team. So that just underscores the fact that the team has really abandoned, the build through the draft model since their title runs in 2002 and 2003. And beyond that, going further back, it just underscores the lack of draft success, the lack of overall opportunities, and the lack of opportunities for the fan base to get excited about a guy like this and for the team to really build a brand and build an infrastructure. And to have a top 10 pick in this draft, which is considered one of the better drafts of the last decade, with the potential to move up for another lottery selection, it gives the Nets a chance to do something that they haven't done, especially in the team's modern history, and definitely since moving to Brooklyn. They've never picked in the lottery since moving to Brooklyn. So coming up next, I'm going to tell you why I feel this opportunity this year and potentially even next year in the draft could lend itself to growing the fan base and building sustainable success for this Brooklyn organization. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more. Use the code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. Look, guys, maybe you're ordering delivery a lot. It's starting to add up. You ever look at those fees and wonder, there's got to be a better way. With Dash Pass, you get $0 delivery fees and exclusive perks like this one. How much could you save over the season? Quite a lot. So here's the play. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 plus in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 order and code WINGSTOP50. That's Dash Pass. Your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Coming back from the break, talking about the Brooklyn Nets 2025 draft and why it will be one of the most historically significant days in Nets history. I think you really have to go back and look at the teams throughout Nets history who are the most beloved by the fan base, the teams who had the most lasting impact. There really is one group, if you're going to go back to the ABA days, you can say that. Like those ABA teams, I think a lot of fans, I hear from some fans from time to time who were there for those days. But I'm talking modern history. There's really been one group who had a lasting impact on this Nets fan base, and it was obviously those teams that made the title runs in 2002 and 2003. And that really was the last time this next organization did what you would call an organic build through the draft type model. Because you look at the guys they had on that team, they drafted Kerry Kittles, they drafted Keith Van Horn, Richard Jefferson, Kenyon Martin. All four of those guys became core pieces. And then obviously they traded for the superstar guy, the number one piece with Kidd. But they had guys who were able to come up with the team, the fan base grew some attachment to, and then Kidd was the piece that put them over the top, obviously. And it was one of the most beloved teams in Nets franchise history because they made those runs to the finals and because a lot of those players had so much success. Looking since then, since that 2003 season, the Nets haven't gotten back to that point, obviously, in terms of, playoff success. And they really haven't done a build like that, since then. They did one time in the 2018-19 season where they drafted a few homegrown pieces. When you talk about Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, they brought in some other guys from the G League and stuff who the fan base got to see develop, but then they traded it in, obviously. And you looked at this Brooklyn era, it really has been a quick fix type of era because the Nets had, whatever they had. They drafted Terrence Williams, I said, and they drafted Derek Favors in 2009 and 2010. Favors was quickly traded in for Darren Williams. Then you brought in guys like Joe Johnson, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, guys who obviously made their names with other teams, had no real connection to this Nets fan base. You can say if they would have had success, if they would have made the finals, they would have, but they didn't. Those guys ended up having no connection. Even if they had that kind of success, those guys, a lot of them, especially Pierce and Garnett, their connection was really with that Celtics team and that Celtics fan base and that Celtics organization. And you look at those guys they brought in, Williams fell well short of expectations. I don't think fans view him positively. I've talked to, people who were with the Nets organization during that time. It doesn't sound like it was all, peaches and roses during his time with the Nets. And then you talk about Pierce, Garnett, and Johnson. those guys went on to do whatever they did. Pierce hasn't had good things to say about the Nets organization since his stint with the team. And then after that, they have the rebuild. They draft those guys like LeVert and Allen. They bring in the reclamation projects like D'Angelo Russell, like Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris. And that 2018-19 team, I would say, is probably the most second beloved Nets team of this modern, this modern era of the organization. And then they traded that all in for KD, Kyrie, and Harden. And I'm not saying the Nets shouldn't have done that. I think you do that 10 times out of 10. Even the Harden trade part of it, the trade made them bona fide title contenders. I think every ownership group, every GM in front office who has been in the Nets position or was in that Nets position that they were in when they made those deals, I think they all would have done it. But it didn't work out, and you're left with an organization that these players, they don't have a connection to the fan base. The fan base doesn't have a connection to the players. And, you could say, like I said, with Darren Williams, Johnson, KG, and Paul Pierce. If it does work out, if they win the championship, they are endeared to this Nets organization. But that's not how it goes, and that's not how it went. And it's really been how this Brooklyn era of the team, how the philosophy has been for these prior regimes, and even this current one early on. It has been the swing for the fence type move with these star names, many of which made their names and were beloved by other fan bases. And if it doesn't work out, like it hasn't, you're left with guys, players who don't have a connection to this team, to this fan base, often have bad things to say about how it went. And the fan base, obviously, because of that, doesn't have a connection the other way. So if you're talking about the way that you're going to grow a fan base, the model, the way you're going to build sustainable success, the way you're going to become a brand, all those teams I mentioned above, at some point throughout it, you have to have a homegrown type player that the fan base can connect itself to, and that reaches a level where they're gaining notoriety throughout the whole NBA, but they're your guy. They're your player. And that is something that this Nets team just hasn't done throughout its franchise's history. And I'm not saying, I referred to these teams earlier, Lakers, Celtics, Bulls, Spurs. Obviously, the guys, when you think of those teams, it's going to be Bird, Magic, Jordan, Spurs, David Robinson, Tim Duncan, now Wembanyama. Are the Nets going to get a guy like that with the 8th pick in this draft? I don't think so. Is it impossible? No, I don't think they're going to get a guy that level. Could they get one in 2026 if we extend this build through the draft discussion even beyond that? Potentially, there's 3 guys at the top of that draft who are extremely highly regarded. But even if they don't, they could get a few players who maybe reach an all-star status, who make multiple all-star teams with the team, and who have a connection to the fan base that allows it to set the stage for something further, maybe a longer organic build where you get multiple of those guys and you build something in the mold of, whoever you want to name, whatever the model is for that. And it's something that the Nets haven't done up to this point, and it's something that this opportunity in this draft with this depth, this level of, talent, I think that it really speaks to something that the fan base can really get excited about. And it's something that they have to nail. Like BJ Johnson said it in the Scout series, they're excited about the opportunity, but they really need to nail this draft. And, they have the opportunity, and we'll see how it goes. But coming up next, to close out the show, I'll talk about why the Nets should commit to this strategy, this build through the draft strategy, not just this year, but also next year, and why I think they will ultimately. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Look, guys, it's the summer. Maybe you're going out to eat more. You're hitting a sporting event, going to a concert. All that starts to add up. Monarch Money helps you track your spending and meet your financial goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the 2025 draft and why it will be one of the most important and consequential days in Nets franchise history. This conversation is obviously centered on building through the draft, getting a homegrown superstar or star level talent, why and how it's something the Nets have never really done throughout their franchise's history, and how this 2025 selection really presents a path for them to do that and build some sustainable success. But I want to extend it even past the 2025 draft, because I think when you look at this coming season, the Nets have two logical paths that they can go. Last season was obviously a tank. I think some people will have their quips with whether or not the Nets executed it properly, but I don't think there's any way that you can debate that they did tank this past season after getting their 2025 and 2026 first round picks back from the Houston Rockets. But last season was definitely a tank. Going into it, everybody knew it was a tank. There's been more conversation throughout this past season and into this offseason about whether that's a direction the Nets will go again. I said two logical paths I can see them heading. The first, and more preferable in my opinion, would be tanking again and trying to secure another top draft pick in what is a loaded class next season. The other path would be trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo or whatever star you want to name, but Giannis has been the guy who has been connected. And based on Sean Marks' comments about not wanting to lock themselves into a 6th or 7th seed, about a player who needs to completely and, absolutely alter the trajectory of their franchise and their timeline, I think Giannis is the guy who he would have been referring to in that scenario, and obviously makes the most sense as a guy who could bring them at least respectably close to a title contender. And I did an episode on this last week, that the way that these Eastern Conference playoffs have shaken out, with the Pacers going to the finals, with the Knicks being that close to the finals, with Jason Tatum going down with an Achilles tear and the Celtics being seemingly knocked out for next year. Darius Garland's now having surgery on his toe. He's going to be out potentially for the start of the season. The East is way more open than it ever has been. And because of that, a Giannis trade makes more sense now than it did at some points during last season when you talk about it from the Nets perspective. But in my opinion, it really doesn't make sense when you weigh the opportunity cost and what you could be passing up, because everything that I've, talked about this episode has been about building through the draft, the opportunity that the Nets have in 2025 to select a star level talent, a homegrown type player that the fan base can get connected to. I said, though, I don't think it's going to be a guy who's the caliber of, whoever you want to name, the all-time greats from those franchises, whether it be Bird, Magic, Jordan, whoever. And the odds are ever going to get a player like that are slim to none. But there are some players who could come closer than others. And when you talk about this draft, the Nets could get a star level player. There's no question about it. But next year at the top of the draft, with three guys in Darren Peterson, AJ DeBansta, and Cam Booser who have real star power, and the Nets can give themselves another opportunity by tanking this coming season to have a top pick in that coming draft. Is it going to pan out that way? I think we saw from the lottery this year that nothing is guaranteed. Anything can happen, but you can put yourself in a position where you're guaranteed a top 5, 6, 7 pick in the draft. And going for Giannis, trading all of that stuff in, you wouldn't just be trading all of your assets. You wouldn't be, giving up all the stuff that you have to give up in terms of the bulk of what you got from acquiring Kevin Durant and flipping Mikal Bridges and all that. You also be passing up on the opportunity for a chance at a top pick in this 2026 draft. And it's something that I just don't see a way that the Nets can do that. And if they were to trade for Giannis this offseason, the Bucks would push undoubtedly for the number 8 pick to be in the draft. Now, should the Nets do that? I think that in no way, shape, or form should they do that. Even if they were to trade for Giannis, that should be off limits in discussions, which might rule them out. But the point being, if you trade all that stuff for Giannis, even if you didn't have to give up that number 8 pick, you're taking yourselves out of the running for a top pick in next year's draft. And that is a class that would really give you an opportunity to land a transformative type of player at the top of the draft if things were to break your way, which is a big if. But the Giannis trade, in my eyes, I just talked about the cycle, the quick fix, all the things that the Nets have done since moving to Brooklyn in this modern era. We talked about KG, Paul Pierce, Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, that team, trading in, missing on a draft pick in Derek Favors and trading it in for that quick fix, trading everything you had to the Celtics for that move, which was obviously dumb for a litany of reasons. But that was a quick fix, didn't work out. Now you have guys who made their names with other teams, are somewhat disgruntled. You're depleted of assets. You're left with guys who the fan base has no connection to, really just nothing to show for it overall. Then they start to do the spunky rebuild, and we're left with, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, that group of guys. They traded all in for KD, Kyrie, Harden. Doesn't work out. And you talk about this Giannis potential move. it's probably a lower percentile outcome, definitely a lower percentile outcome than the KD, Kyrie, Harden group. When they made that trade for James Harden, they were a bona fide title favorite. I said contender earlier. I should have said favorite. That's what I meant to say. They were the favorite in the league. And if a million things didn't go wrong, whether it be Harden's hamstring, Kyrie's ankle, the foot on the line, the vaccine mandate, whatever you want to say about it, if all those things don't go wrong, they probably win at least one title. So that was a time where the quick fix, you could easily talk yourself into it. And there was a real rhyme and reason and logic to what they were doing. And if you talk about this Giannis conversation and this Giannis situation, I said the East is a lot weaker, so it makes some more sense. Does that mean it makes sense? No, because the Nets would be trading most of their assets. They would still have cap space left over. They would still have some draft picks left over, but we'd be talking about a blank canvas, bringing in Giannis and, having really no surrounding pieces around him on the roster. So you'd have to take Giannis and build out the entire rotation pretty much in a league and a CBA where it's becoming extremely difficult, or more difficult than it was before, to build around those superstar type level guys because of the restrictions on spending. You would talk about that. You would talk about a league where depth is becoming more important than ever before. It's on full display right now with the Pacers, with the Thunder, more notably, the importance of building out rotations, going 8-9 guys deep, having two-way versatile guys, that can play and do all of these different things. Trading for Giannis, trading all your assets, and thinking that you can have enough left over to fill out the roster. Maybe you can. Maybe it's enough to get out of the Eastern Conference, or this weakened, depleted version of the Eastern Conference. But then you still are probably going to run into a buzzsaw in the Thunder or whatever other team comes out of that gauntlet of a Western Conference. So you're just talking about the percentage outcomes. What percentage chance is this that it's going to give the Nets an opportunity to win a championship? It's always going to be low in any build, any path you take. But trading everything in for Giannis, passing on a chance to get a homegrown guy in this 2026 draft for a percentage outcome that's probably extremely low, way lower than what the Nets saw with KD, Kyrie, and Harden, it's an extremely tough sell. And it's something that I think most of the fan base is against. I've heard some of you talk about, why you would be in favor of a Giannis trade, but I think most of the fan base agrees with what I'm saying because of everything I outlined about them being starving for a homegrown type talent that they've really never seen before. So, I don't think the Giannis path is a path that the Nets are going to go. And I think everything I've outlined and everything that we've heard from the Nets front office in terms of messaging about sustainable success, if you watch the Scout series, you'll hear some of the things that they're talking about. It doesn't sound like a team, in my opinion, that is going to trade it all in for another quick fix. It seems like they finally learned their lesson. They see the opportunity in this 2025 draft, the depth and the level of talent in the draft. And I think they see it next season. I think they see those guys at the top of that draft. And I think my prediction is that they're going to go into another tank, and they're going to do it properly this time, whether that means, not having these veteran guys like Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith, later on, D'Angelo Russell, whoever you want to talk about, these guys that are floor raisers, not having that guys, maybe taking on some bloated contracts as salary dumps for more draft picks, but really tanking the right way and giving yourself a chance at one of those top players. And that, I know there's a subset of the fan base that doesn't want that disagrees with that. And that's totally fine. Tanking is, I would describe it as a necessary evil in today's NBA. And if you're going to come back at me and say, look, they did that this past year, even though they didn't do it great, and they ended up 8th. Well, my retort would be, while nothing's guaranteed, if they do it right this coming year and they can get a top 3 worst record in the league, they're going to have a higher pick, at guaranteed higher pick than they had this year. And there's a good chance that they could be in the top 3 or top 4 in a draft where there's at least 3 guys who look like they could be bona fide stars at the next level. So I think it's the direction the Nets are going to go. While a tank is difficult, I think this coming season, you'll have these guys to get excited about, whoever the Nets take at 8 and whatever other picks they end up with in the draft. And you'll have those guys to look at their development. And then you'll have the pick next season that could potentially turn into a superstar level type player, even with a higher ceiling than what we're seeing this year. And that would give you, a group of guys, a nucleus of 3-4 young guys who could potentially bring you into the next era of Nets basketball, and really the first homegrown era that we've seen since those title teams, or ever, depending on how you view that build. So I think that that's very exciting. And I think that it's a path that, Nets fans are really overdue to see. And I think that the Nets are going to take advantage of the opportunity. I'm excited to see what they do with the draft and what they do with this opportunity they have over the next month. But that does it for this episode of Locked On Nets here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today and has tuned in since I took over the show. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Anything that you can do to help build the channel and engage is much appreciated. But I'll be back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.